In today's video, I'm going to be teaching you how to remove the understeer of an F124, going through 3 simple speed categories of high speed, medium speed, and low speed as well, giving you setup options per speed category on how you can fine tune your setup for your driving style. With that being said, let's get into the heart of the video and get started. As I mentioned in the introduction to this video, I'm going to have 3 segments of this video: the high speed, medium speed, and low speed as well. Starting off in the high speed segment of this video, we're going to be looking at the front wing angle and also the ride height for the front of the car. Both are extremely powerful options in tuning the balance for high speed corners. Going over what the front wing will be doing, it's quite simple and probably the most simple setup option that we have in this video. And the more front wing angle you have, the more front grip you have. Of course, the negative of that is going to be that you add more front wing and you might get more drag down the straight as a net result of that. But quite simply, if you want the car to turn more in a high-speed corner, more front wing angle is a fantastic option to be using. Something that is very underrated within the F1 game is that you can adjust your front wing angle during pit stops. So it's something that you can utilize to your advantage if you feel like the car is understeering during the race, and this can give you the option to fix it on the go. Unlike basically any other setup option where you're stuck to it once the race has started. Jumping into the second setup option of this video, and that's going to be the front ride height. And basically the front ride height is a really difficult setting to maximize and get to your full potential with, quite simply, as if you go too low, it's going to be catastrophic for your lap time potential and is going to cause massive understeer in high speed corners. Get it right though, and the car will rotate like a dream and you'll find lap time potential for free. So something that I advise as a baseline number to be working forward with is 19 on the front ride height within the F124 game, and that can give you an option to really have a good car that's rotating well and then to fine tune the setup around it. As I alluded to before, lower on this setting is always better to a certain point. And what I'm going to do is teach you now how to find that certain point by going too low on the front ride height and teaching you the telltale signs on how you can feel the car being too low. So first of all, you're going to feel that the car is scrubbing and causing a lot of friction down the straights, what's going to be causing you a lot of loss in top speed potential. You're going to feel that by having a reference to your speed from a normal ride high, and you're going to see that we're massively down on straight line speed potential as well. A second sign is curbing's become much harder to use, and it becomes much more affected when you're trying to go over curbs. Of course, that was an exaggerated example there because that curb is quite big here on Silverstone, but you can see just how much it flew my car into the air in that situation. The third sign, and probably the most prominent sign of all what we're looking for in this example, is going to be massive understeer in high speed corners that you cannot just get away from. For example, already there you could see the car was washing away and we had no ability to get the car back to the apex, quite simply as the downforce was stalled from the airflow underneath the car, and is impossible to get airflow back that has been stalled without going slower. Of course, you can see during Copse corner the car was understeering massively, and that is just something that makes the car harder and harder and harder to rotate. And as you can see, because the airflow is being stalled underneath the car, that is going to be affecting the rear diffuser as well. So if you are getting big snaps of oversteer mid to exit on high speed corners, there's also a very large possibility that the front ride height is too low and is going to be stalling the airflow underneath the car, and that is going to be affecting the rear balance. So you can see just where the driver is underneath, this is just where the floor basically is starting, and if that is touching the ground, it's going to stop the airflow going towards the rear of the car, and if you don't have the airflow going towards the rear diffuser, you lose so much grip potential, and this is what's going to be causing a big snap of oversteer. I'm going to briefly show you as well what it looks like if you go too high on the front ride height, and this can give you an opportunity to sort of look at it as well. So 31 is way too high on the front ride height for F124 and is not usable in any situation to go fast. What is going to happen here is you are going to have a good top speed potential down the straight because there's going to be no friction from the front of the car rubbing over the concrete basically, so it's going to give you a good top speed potential. Curbs will become a bit more usable as well, but most of all, you're just going to feel that the car is not gripping and is not rotating in the corners as much as it should be. You can see we're just going through, and this is a lot of understeer, because the front of the ride height is not working properly with the floor of the car and is not compressing the air enough to be traveling underneath the car in the most efficient way possible. So like I say, I advise taking a baseline number of 19 in this situation and then working forward from there, lowering the front ride height as much as possible before you start getting catastrophic understeer in high-speed corners. But if you start going up on the ride height, making sure the car is still rotating nicely. One click of ride height change will not change that much of your speed potential. Actually got a big step of oversteer. Will not be changing that much of your lap time potential, but it can be a lot of confidence you can be gaining or losing because of that. So just keep that in mind, that one click is not the be-all end-all for lap time difference. To wrap up the first segment of this video of high-speed corners, how I would judge a high-speed corner is a gear usage between 6 and 8. If you're in the gear usage between 6 and 8, I would define that as a high-speed corner within F124. Moving into the middle speed corner, and that's going to be something that I define between 4th gear and 6th gear as well. So of course there's a little bit of an overlap with the 6th gear there, but it's natural and you have to judge the situation and the corner type to your own preference as well. So with that being said, we're going to be jumping into the front anti-roll bar, and the lower that you go, the more that the car is going to be soft on the front axle, and it's going to be rotating the car because it's digging the car into the road effectively and leaning the weight over to the outside of the track. So you can see here, when we do turn, the car will always become weighted to the outside tire, and that is how the car is going to be generating a lot of friction, by putting weight to the outside tire, and that is how you're going to be turning more efficiently and getting more grip. Effectively, the more weight you can put on the outside tire, then again, big snap of oversteer. I'll get to why that happened in just a second. So good save though. But yeah, so basically the more weight you can put on the outside tire while turning, the more grip you have on the front axle, and that can be allowing you to rotate the car more efficiently. The downside of that, as you just saw during turn 1, put too much weight on that front tire too quickly and too aggressively, and it will cause massive snaps of oversteer. So the way that you balance this is you want that front anti-roll bar to be basically as low as possible within F124, but without having these big snaps of oversteer that's induced by the front just being overloaded with grip too quickly. So you want this to be as low as possible, but then basically avoiding situations like that. Can we bring it back? Yes, we can. That was a good save as well. Going back to TCAM, so yes, basically you want this front anti-roll bar setting to be as low as possible, but without causing big snaps of oversteer like it's doing right now. So of course this can be changing so much depending on the wing balance and the general car balance that you've set up as your philosophy. But going back into the setup page to sort of give you a fine-tuning option on how you can look into this, if the car is having big snaps of oversteer, then you really want to be going to, like, let's say 10, 11 on that front anti-roll bar. And then if the car is having big snaps of oversteer, like I was just having in those middle speed and high speed corners as well, then that can be allowing you to get the balance back in the car and how you can be fine-tuning it to your own preference. If the car is understeering and having gradual understeer within mid-speed corners, like I say, between 4th and 6th gear, then what I advise is going down on that front anti-roll bar. But if you're having big snaps of oversteer when the front anti-roll bar is too low, then you can increase it by 1 or 2 clicks to bring the balance and stability back into the car. It's something that is so powerful. As you saw, I had multiple spins when I was putting the anti-roll bar to 1. So go too low and the car will become unpredictable. Go too high and the car will become a boat. Go just about right, and then your car will be rotating and your front axle will be very stable in the corners. You can see during Brooklands and Luffield there, I was able to pick up a good stability in the car, a good rotation in the car, and it was a very nice car to be driving in that situation because of it. The second setup option that really affects middle speed corners, but of course low speed corners as well, but we'll get into that later in the video, is going to be your front brake bias. If you feel like the front tires are locking, then you can really go rearward on the brake bias to help the rotation of the car, and this can be such a big powerful tool that you can be using to maximize your setup potential going forward. So Basically, right now, what we're going to be doing is starting on 54% brake bias, and you're going to see how we can affect the rotation of the car going into Brooklands and Luffield, of course, starts Sector 2 here in Silverstone. So the lower that you can go on the brake bias, basically the better within F124. Of course, there's many different setup philosophies, and if you have a car that's a bit more oversteery, a bit more unstable, running more front brake bias will help bring stability into the car, and the more rearward you go, of course, the less stable the car is. So we're going to be starting on 54% brake bias, and you can see that the car has a bit of understeer going into the corner. Ignore the snap oversteer, that's because I was off the racing line. But yeah, so starting on 54% brake bias, and then going forward, we're going to move it down to 52%, and now you're going to see the car rotating a bit easier, a bit more efficiently as well. Yeah, that's going to be represented within that corner quite nicely. The downside of that is if you go too low on the brake bias, then you're going to end up basically doing this. I've just put the brake bias to 50% for this example, but yeah, it'll do this basically, and that is spinning straight away. So you really have to balance that, and the way that I advise balancing that is taking a brake bias that's relatively safe at the start of your practice, start of your stint or racing session that you're doing, let's say 54-55% brake bias, and then just keep on going lower and lower as you can until you start having rear locking. A general rule of thumb is the more braking that you actually have to do and the longer braking zone that you have to do, then you do want to be adding more front brake bias to the car. Quite simple as that. Stability will be helping you not to be making mistakes, and the less that the braking distance is, then you can be running more rearward bias as well. For example, this corner here, you would want to be running more front brake bias just to help the stability of the car, as the braking zone is longer, so there's more chance of something to go wrong during that phase of the lap. And if your braking zone is quite small, let's say like in Luffield, big snaps are oversteer. Yeah, if your braking zone is quite small like Luffield, and then you can be running really aggressively on the rear brake bias because there isn't that much time in the braking zone, so there's not that much time for the instability of the car to be affecting the balance, let's say. So yeah, that's been the middle speed corners, and like I say, I refer to this really between 4th and 6th gear. So Brooklands and Luffield here at Silverstone that we're in right now is a great example of middle speed corners. The final part of this initial video is going to be about low speed corners, and the most influential part of a low speed corner is going to be your off throttle differential. Again, you want to be getting this as low as possible because this is going to be giving you more rotation. Quite simply, the higher that you go on your off throttle differential, the less rotation you have. The lower that you go, the more rotation you have. But if you go too low, then the car is going to be completely a mess to drive. It's going to be a disaster, because what happens with a differential is we're going to be looking at this in the third person camera. When you have two tires on the rear of the car, what's going to be affecting by the differential, what's going to be happening is the inside tire is going to be traveling a shorter distance than the outside tire, and it's always going to be traveling a different speed because of that. So that differential, when it's 100% locked, the two rear tires are forced to spin at identical speeds. The less that your differential is locked, or if you have an open differential in some racing cars as well, the tires can spin completely freely at their own desire. The upside of that is both tires have the ability to maximize their own grip potential. The downside of that is it becomes very difficult and unpredictable for drivers to manage the grip level, because you have two completely different grip levels going on at the rear of the car compared to your left tire and your right tire. So as you can see, when we're just driving very smoothly, very slowly to be honest, during this lap and this opening sector of Silverstone, the inside tire will always have less distance to travel than the outside tire, and this is where the differential will be playing effect to help manage the difference of the car and bring more stability for the driver to have confidence with. That is the snap of oversteer you saw very briefly there on the entry to the corner, that if you have your differential setting too low, you will start to get these massive snaps of oversteer because the tires are spinning at independent grip ratios, or grip speeds, let's say. And that is what's going to make it a really chaos to drive. You can see a big snap of oversteer there as well. So what I advise with this differential setting is going to about 30% as a baseline value. That's always about a good value to be having within the F124 game. And then if you can start pushing that differential to be lower and lower, let's take 20 for this example, without having instability in the car, then that of course will be advantageous for you to be driving with. How you recognize the car can be suffering from too low of a differential setting is quite simply that the car becomes snappy on the entry to the corner, and that will be a good indication on how that is affecting the car. If you're in a racing stint and you've set your differential too low and the car is unpredictable, something that can be good as a counteraction for that, as saving the situation effectively, is pushing your brake bias forward on the F124 game, and that can help bring stability back to the car. So just driving in T-Cam again right now so you can see a bit more on footage how it actually looks. So yeah, that's something that I advise. If you have the differential setting too low, then you're going to see that the car will be rotating, but you're always fighting the car on the entry and is having a lot of unpredictability, like here. So like I said, I advise taking a 30% off-throttle differential as a baseline value to be working forward with, and then you can start building and lowering your setup to maximize your rotation. Just keep an eye out for the snaps of oversteer on the entry to the corner, and if you don't get any of those, then the setup is sweet. So that's been like a beginner guide on how to remove understeer with an F124 and giving you a bit of an insight analysis into the setup potential that this game has and how you can maximize your own lap times as well. I do plan on doing a follow-up video to this about oversteer, so then you can learn how to set up the car around oversteer as well, and basically going through the same setup options on how the car is affected to reduce oversteer in any situation. So with all that being said, thank you so much for watching. I've been Brendon Leigh, and I will catch you in the next video. Grazie, ciao, ciao, bye bye.